Welcome to another episode of the Film Rescue Show. And boy, we've got one for you today. We sent out that line. We pulled in a good one. We got Jason back on the show, but let me introduce our hosts. We have the professional cynic, Jesse. How you doing, Jesse? What have you been watching lately?
I was mentioning off air. I started watching with my partner Neon Genesis Evangelion. I thought it was just robots punching each other. Turns out, no, it's actually very depressing and it's very rough.
Existential is a good way to put it.
We got 4 episodes in. I was like, all right, we got to take a break. Can't do this.
And to take us through anything scary we might interact with on this episode, we have our horror Hope in the house.
I'm wearing my
Hope, what? Oh, look
Hello
at that
Kitty
tea.
Psycho shirt.
Nice.
I love it. Perfect. What have you been watching lately? Is it going to be up the Hello Kitty alley?
No, so as much as I love Sanrio, I really do. I haven't been watching any Hello Kitty.
Doesn't seem like your thing.
Actually, I've been
It could be anyone's
I've been
thing.
the biggest Hello Kitty fan since I was a kid. I really have.
Really? I did not know this.
Yes, no,
What?
I fucking love it. Like, I have so many shirts and stuff that's like Sanrio, like Batsumaru and Geropi are like my favorites. Like, oh,
I love it.
them. So
Nice.
you got some kawaii to this horror.
Perfect. And returning to the show, we have Jason Lenox. Hey, it's great to have you back on the show. You picked out a killer for us.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what have you been watching lately?
So I've been watching 2 things a lot recently. My anime current, I just finished watching the first season of Solo Leveling, which I thought was awesome. I highly recommend it. It's really popular and trendy right now, but it's definitely earning its stripes, and I really would recommend it. And in live action, I have been watching the final season of the nihilistic Italian crime show Gomorrah. That if you
Whoa, okay.
right,
Left field.
which is if you took Sopranos and took all the family humor and anything fun and just condensed it to just pure nihilistic violence. I'm almost done with the final season. I've been watching the show for like a year, and it is bleak. And I'm almost sad to let it go because I'm enjoying it that much. But can't recommend Gomorrah enough if you like things like Breaking Bad, Sopranos.
What's it on?
So it's on HBO, but I've been buying them on Blu-ray from Kino Lorbe, like the boutique Blu-ray TV show people. Really, really good. It is, I think it was like the most popular Italian crime TV show ever. It's super expensive. It's super beautiful. And it's just depressing and nihilistic, and there is no fun. And whether you're good, bad, or indifferent, everyone gets hurt on the show. So for people that were like, I wanted to see more fighting on Sopranos and more war and things like that, that's your show. I stumbled onto it when it was on Netflix, and then the Weinstein trials affected it legally, that it had to be pulled out of there, and then it kind of disappeared for a hot minute. Then it showed back up on HBO, and then I've been getting them. So that's Gomorrah. Highly recommend it if you like that genre. I love crime movies and TV shows. So I really can't say enough good stuff about it. It's a great watch. Lots of fun.
You got me at it's depressing.
And I recommend watching it in Italian with subtitles. I tried English, and I really felt the Italian original music and audio was just much better. So
no, for sure.
Yeah.
Very serious
if
watch.
It's on Max, I'm down.
Yep.
Jason coming with the double-barreled suggestions. Both of these sound excellent.
They are.
I'm definitely going to be checking out the anime, but I also have HBO. I might have to get a little nihilistic with you there, homie. That sounds good.
Yes, and Jason just sent me some of his Hello Kitty stuff.
I love that.
Satan.
Nice.
Well, let me introduce our movie of the day. Before I do that, please like and subscribe to the video that you're watching. If you're listening, hit the follow button on whatever your podcasting app is. And if you're here on Patreon, mwah, I love you. Thanks for being here, baby. Today, we're going to be talking about KRULL, directed by Peter Yates. This was a fantasy sci-fi adventure that I drunkenly watched last night. Had a great time with it. I can't wait to share my notes. I'm really, really curious though, Jason. Why is this one on the chopping block for today? How did you find KRULL? Why do you want to talk about it?
So being on this podcast, the few times that I've done it, is so weird to me because I feel like we're doing like an in-depth analysis of my childhood. So checking,
No, it's legit
Oh
that.
no.
yeah.
Every time it has been like it's crazy.
So rewatching these films, for this show is kind of like homework. But then I have to go back because this came out when I was 8. Because I checked the year, I'm like, okay, I was 8 years old when this
Mhm.
came out. And I remember as a young lad in the early 80s, going to see a lot of these films. So when I talk about them, there's kind of the current critical 40s Jason being like, here's my serious thoughts about the film. But then in the case of KRULL, as an 8-year-old, this film, like I remember seeing it. I remember being like super excited about it. So there's almost like two kind of reviews of like my recollection of it from the 80s and what that meant to me as a kid,
Yeah.
and then talking about it today from a more critical, nuanced, older stance. So when this film came out, it was a really different era, for myself as a little kid. I would ask my mom, my dad, aunts and uncles, like, take me to the movies. And it was like going through the newspaper. And I remember KRULL kind of tying into this weird thing of kids having like ninja throwing stars, right? And the main
Oh my God.
and I
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
remember
yeah.
that was a big thing in the 80s, like kids getting like throwing stars, right? And it was like, oh my goodness. So this film had this thing like this big throwing star, and that was like the big marketing push. And KRULL was a different era of not franchises, of these kind of like weird, what let's make a feature film about something completely original. Um, a kind of an era of films that doesn't really exist so much anymore. And again,
Yeah.
Yeah,
living
yeah.
through it as a
It's
kid,
it's practically extinct at this point.
yes,
The realistic looking dark fantasy film.
Mm.
Like,
yeah,
there was there's like this all kind of
Flash
spun out of
Gordon,
Conan the Barbarian.
Flash
Yeah.
Gordon, Conan
Yeah.
Barbarian. Um,
Mhm.
so I mean,
Yeah.
I remember this, and again, I didn't appreciate it as a little. I just was like, this is what we do, right? So I have a lot of fond memories of this film, um, but at the same time, I have it on my shelf. I have it on DVD, right? There's things as I've watched this film multiple times over the years that like didn't quite track that well, where it's like it could have been better. So
Yeah.
that's really for
Mm.
me why KRULL is something that's like it was. I always felt KRULL was one of those films that could have been bigger than it ended up being, because there was a lot of really cool
Yeah.
elements to it that maybe didn't quite click, which
Yeah.
keeps it in our public awareness, but it never really had that like blowout mass appeal, which is kind of disappointing because I think they had all the pieces and parts to make it work. It's just they didn't quite assemble it correctly.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I
Mhm.
think my watch was like, uh, I remember fucking Family Guy mentioning this movie. Like that's my introduction to it was like Family Guy riffing on this like weird sci-fi thing that I had never seen before. And so I checked it out at the behest of Family Guy. So it has that like that kind of like cultural seat where it's like it's in there, but we don't talk about this for being as unique as it is. I think especially compared to it gets accused of being a Star Wars clone, and I'm like, I don't know if I see
Not at
that as
all.
I
much. Like I can,
You can see influence, so I wouldn't say it's a
yeah, the
clone.
influence is there for sure, but like the clone, it's like I don't know if I agree.
I think where the comparison might be to Star Wars is you have the special weapon. So obviously we have lightsabers in Star Wars. In this film, we have the
The
glaive.
glaive.
And the glaive kind of
Yeah.
reminds me of our talk about Thunderdome, where it's like everyone remembers this
Yeah,
film for the glaive, and the dude barely uses it. And then when he tries to use it, it
Yeah.
gets stuck in the monster at the end, and you're like, okay. So it's like all this
That's it.
thing, and he gets it out of the volcano, and it doesn't get used very much, and you're like, okay, but wasn't that the whole thing
The
that
whole
people,
point?
right? The whole thing with the symbol of that
Yeah.
throwing star. And like I said, as a kid, I remember a little kid that lived next door to me got a throwing star from like some kind of flea market, and my parents like losing their, oh my god, you can't be around that. And he would like throw it at this wooden door at a church maintenance shed near our houses. And it was like, I threw it. Oh my God, you're grounded. So I mean, I remember that at that
That's
time,
so funny.
it was like throwing stars. And there's an episode in the 8th season of South Park, I believe, where the kids hit Butters with a throwing star, and he
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was like,
Fucking rough.
I remember that, like, it was like a cultural
Casio.
thing of like ninjas and like that kind of like Japanese warrior culture kind of like filtering into our pop culture in the 80s with ninjas. And I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was probably the peak of that for like,
Yes.
oh yeah.
but it was like, look, here's Asian weapons. It's a throwing star. And KRULL like hit it. Like they hit on that, and the glaive is cool. And that's all their marketing was, that symbol. Like it's just a straight, portrait of it. But I mean, am I forgetting something? Because I think it's barely used in the film. Barely.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And when
And even then, he doesn't really use it himself. It like has a mind of its own.
Right.
It's kind of like he just holds his hand out and it just does its own
right,
thing.
when I looked up the glaive for this movie, it said a sentient artifact, and I'm like, wait, like,
But even that,
That means doesn't it have to speak then?
and maybe it would have been better if it did. I mean, that if it would talk to him and like do
Yeah.
more, like a talking sword or something like that. But it's just so weird.
I love that. I love
my
that
favorite
pitch.
thing is literally there's like 20 minutes at the end when he uses it, and he just holds his arm out, and that's all. It just like it keeps showing the glaive like being used, but he's not technically using it. He's just like
Right.
there.
And then in
You-
climax, it doesn't even work. It just gets stuck in that dude, and then he holds hands with
Yeah.
his girlfriend, and they use the power of love to kill it. So you're like, well, what?
Mm,
Right? I mean, like they hold hands and they
Right.
kind of like point their hands
The
together,
fire,
and they're
the
like,
fire
"Pew, pew,
spout.
pew." So it's kind of, like I said. So to me, that's where this thing lost it. Where it's like you had like this banger idea. It's like when we talked about Thunderdome. Like, what was our big correction? Like, more Thunderdome.
Right.
Rarely
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
something that everyone, rap videos were made about Thunderdome. No one made rap videos about kids in an airplane. It was like you had a great idea.
Yeah.
Triple down on it. I think that's
yeah.
paradox of KRULL. But there's so much weird stuff because there's the Cyclops. And I remember as a kid,
Rel. Oh, justice for my boy Rel.
yeah, and I remember as a kid, like that horrified me. He's like, I know I'm gonna get crushed, but there's just like these like little things, like he gets crushed, and then that old man getting like duplicated, and like kind of that
Ooh.
body horror stuff, and then those dudes that are kind of the stormtrooper types, they get shot, and then like a bug or whatever like comes out of their head.
That
Yeah.
was some of my
I love it.
favorite stuff. Like
Yeah.
the very beginning when they kill one of the Slayers, and like
Yeah.
it like exploded, and then like it like oozed out, and I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Right. So
But
there's all
then
these like little bits and pieces that you're like, damn, like you guys really had some cool stuff, and like it was
right.
kind of science fiction-y, but then they don't really go
Yeah.
anywhere with it. Would have been like they could.
That's so the big misfortune of it was the fact that they like tiptoed around, like, nah, lean in, man, just lean in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I even made the note when I was watching this. I was like, does it really even have to be a fortress that travels through space? Can it just be like a kingdom on a planet? What do you even need the science fiction stuff here?
Yeah, if you're not going to really
It doesn't
lean into
help.
it, why have like
Yeah.
a sprinkle? Like you said, yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
fortress that floats around, but like, yeah, are they science fiction-y? Are they just like fantasy monsters? It's just weird. So they just touch.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
As I was watching it, I was thinking, this feels a lot like that Masters of the Universe movie with Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah.
This feels a lot like that.
But
It does have
It's like
that vibe.
a
Yeah.
little bit of that sci-fi stuff in there. It's like, this should be space. This should be a fantasy stuff. The science fiction doesn't really help the story
Yeah.
at
and then
all.
there was like the lady with the spider, right? And then there's the spider, and it's like
Yes.
stop
Oh,
motion.
yeah.
So there's all these like disjointed parts where you're like, oh yeah, and there's the Cyclops, and then there's the lady with the spider, and then the KRULL monster at the end. He's just kind of this big static blob. He's almost like the MCP, where it's like, hi, I'm this big angry face, and then like I said, they use like the power of love to kill him, and it's just weird. But the KRULL monster at the end was really cool, but he's just like this face.
Well crafted.
Yeah.
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 But he reminded me of the MCP from Tron, just this static head.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. My analysis of this movie was I mentioned this to Hope this morning.
Yeah.
It's basically like playing Elder Scrolls Skyrim, and you're doing all the side quests first, and then you do the campaign in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not far off.
Yeah.
Not far off.
The 90% of this movie is side quests. Like, they go to see the seer, and it's like, oh, he knows where the Black Fortress is. And then they go to see the 3 trees, and then he dies. And they're like, but there is this other person we can go see. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Why did you go see the seer at all? Go see the other person. Especially when that one is directly connected to one of the characters. It's like if you watched A New Hope, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi dies, and they say, okay, before we go to Yavin, we got to stop by Dagobah real fast, and we got to talk to this guy named Yoda. We got to talk to him real quick. Imagine shoving Yoda into A New Hope. That's what it is. It's just a side quest to the main story. You could have just skipped one and gone right to there.
Did anybody else also, when they were like, "Oh, the fire mares can go 1,000 leagues in a day," and I was like,
Yeah.
when they said that, I was like, "Oh, cool, we're gonna get some like really awesome like fantasy like thing," and it's just a fucking bunch of horses.
With,
Yeah.
Rocket horses,
like their
baby.
race cars. Like,
I was
Yeah.
like, we get nothing extra. I was expecting like flames coming off them. I was expecting like special teleporting powers, or like I was like, no, it's just some fucking horses.
Right.
You know what, Hope?
They're just real fast.
But Hope, how much of it though? And there's that fine line that, like, I think one of our biggest complaints as modern film watchers is too much CG, whereas a film like this was bound
Too much green screen.
bound too much by just practical special effects. So, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, you know, and
Well,
I think
if they, I guess my thing is, if they were gonna call them, they could have just called them like the Mystic Mares and not Fire Mares. You know,
Yeah.
like they could have just
The-
changed the name and it would have been fine. I think. Like, but I was like, okay, Fire Mares. They're gonna run so fast and it's like fire or whatever. It's like they could have just said the Mystic Mares and be like, okay, cool, they're fast.
Yeah. Their
There's-
reach exceeded their grasp, basically.
There's not a lot of scene to scene logic. Like
Right.
the pieces are really functional here, but like I want to point out, I truly I want justice for my boy Rel.
Yeah.
Rel ended up being my favorite character of the movie. I love the practical effect for his eye. Apparently, the other actors had to lead him around the swamp set so he wouldn't.
Oh,
fall.
did you notice the first time he has shake somebody's hand, he misses, and he has
Yeah.
to pick it back up?
There's another scene later when he goes to pick something off the ground and he has to like double grab for it because he can't
Yeah.
fucking see shit.
Yeah.
That
but
could play though into depth perception because Cyclops is.
Oh, straight
So
up,
that
yeah.
could just be like a
Oh, yeah.
character flaw. Like they make fun of that in Futurama with Leela sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
why is a Cyclops a space captain? No depth perception.
Yeah.
But
I did note while watching it, Rel is Hodor.
kinda.
well,
He holds the door open.
He does.
Fucking
But, like,
Jesse.
What I want to point out in that scene is that Rel hangs back, right? He's like, I can't go with you guys.
Why?
To then change his mind, jump on a fire mare, catch right back up to them to die for them. Like he says, I'm gonna fuck off, and then comes right back into the plot to die.
Why?
Why? What? Like the rest of the crew's dropping like flies. He could have had anybody else hold the door, right? They just he comes back into the plot to die, and I want justice for my man. Like I want his death to be like explained at least. Like he doesn't even say why he's hanging back. He's just I can't go with you.
I think the strength, and maybe even back to Family Guy, and again, people of a certain age, I saw this when I was a kid, and the practical special effects in this stuff, the Slayers, like they burned into my consciousness, and then
they're
Rel
cool.
being
They're cool.
and the wizard when they kind of capture him and like he gets like sucked away and everything else.
Oh, that effect is amazing. Yeah,
those things. And I think where these films come from, and I heard someone recently talking about seeing the new Dune movie and then going back to watch the 80s one, and it was a gentleman that probably was around my age or a little older, and was saying how much the film in the 80s horrified him as a kid. And if you go back,
there's a lot of really creepy shit in that movie.
You can watch it, say whatever, but I remember being a kid, 9 years old, and seeing Dune and being
Mhm.
freaked out because the mechanical special effects are really good. And like I think for a lot of us, it's almost like this like lizard brain memory of like these just scenes where you're like, ugh, even the spider and the lady that like
Yeah.
she dies, the old age and everything else in KRULL. It's like even though maybe the whole film is disjointed, it's like I still remember that stuff where it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
creepy, and oh, it was so gross, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and big thumbs up to all the people that worked on those films, doing the makeup and the special effects and the practical work, because they did a good job disturbing me, right? Like, so I remember it,
Yeah.
and it
Mhm.
stuck with me. So many of those films had those creepy things. Like in Flash Gordon, there was that thing in the stump where they had to put their hand in. Ugh, like that creeped me out as a kid. It still freaks me out. And it's probably just like a plastic sack they're pushing some air into it, so it's like, right? But they did a
Exactly.
great
But
job scaring children.
it's visceral, right? It's so real. You can see the texture. Hope, had you seen this film before? Is this your first
This
watch?
was my first
How are you coming
watch.
into
This
it?
was my first watch,
Whoa.
actually.
Hmm.
So if you put your producer hat on, what are you like absolutely must keep in our version?
The thing is, like, what we keep touching on is there's so many great scenes. Like, I
Yeah.
could probably chop this up into like 10 short 10-minute films.
Mm,
And it's the thing that's really loose is the connective tissue is super
yeah.
loose. So like
Yeah.
it's like when I'm going to use an example that I tore all the ligaments in my shoulder. All that was connecting it was just pure muscle and the tendon, you know? So, like, it's
Whoa.
there, but all that connective tissue that really should be there holding it together is gone.
Mm,
And I feel like that's what it was because again, we talked about how these images are embedded in your heads. Like the character design was so cool. The characters
yeah.
themselves individually were really cool. You have the glaive like that wasn't even used. Like there's so many cool things, but like when you piece it together, it's so disjointed. And I think that's its biggest flaw was the disjointedness of everything.
Mm. It's like trying really hard to show you its sci-fi fantasy cred. Like you can tell
Mhm.
these people are very invested in the things that were popular at that time within these like artistic spaces, and I really am impressed by that. I'm really hard pressed to dislike the movie, even though there's so much of it that like makes me want to rip my hair out.
Yeah.
uh Jesse, what about you? Was this your first watch or had you seen this before?
I'd seen this a long time ago, and the biggest issue for me is that the film itself has no real identity of its own because it is very tropey. You've
Yeah.
seen this story so many times. Like, this came out, I think, was this the same year that Return of the
Yep,
Jedi came out in
correct.
1983? Yeah, so Star Wars is now wrapped up its trilogy, and you have all these different, like Conan the Barbarian is out, Flash Gordon, and then years later you get things like Return to Oz, you get Dark Crystal,
Never
Never
ending
Ending Story,
story. Yep.
which, by the way, the quicksand scene, Never Ending Story did it better because that fucked us all up.
Oh my god.
Jesus
Gave trauma to a
Christ.
whole generation.
God damn it. Yeah, like that's the thing is that there's so many other films that do this stuff better because you're more invested with character. Like, name Liam Neeson's character.
Oh god.
There you go.
Keegan?
Keegan?
Don't look it up.
No, I didn't even look it up. I think it's Keegan.
Let's take a
You can
look.
see the pages
Liam
flashing
Neeson?
in my glasses.
Yeah, it's Keegan. Yeah, okay, it's Keegan. Yeah, but yeah, but yeah, you have him and you have Hagrid from Harry Potter showing up, and it's just all these different actors. They're not given a ton of depth in the film. That you always say, Seth, you need to have a downtime scene in
Mhm.
in movies. There isn't really one in this film.
No, a camaraderie scene between the whole gang would have been very welcome in lieu of 10 fucking uninterrupted minutes of mountain climbing.
Oh God,
That's
Cass even made note of that. It's like,
I
can we please cut the mountain climbing?
I think
Jesus
what
Christ.
killed it for that was the fact that like it's supposed to show how grandiose it is, But when I can't even see the characters climbing it, I just see like I was literally saying like, is that a speck? Is that like film grain or is it them? Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't
Also,
differentiate.
can I make note? They say that going up to try to get the glaive is like a really challenging thing, and like no man has ever returned. He just goes in and puts his hand in lava and pulls it out, and it's no big fucking deal. Like, are you serious? No
Power of
traps, no
love.
villain, no monster, nothing.
Power
Just
of
grabs it.
love.
But I thought he was like putting his hand in lava, but apparently it's just slime. What? And apparently the glaive came from space, and it's just in a mountain now.
I'm fine with it coming from space. KRULL is not Earth, right? Like very.
It looked like the opening to The Thing when the ship flies past the camera and lands on Earth. It looked like the opening to John Carpenter's The Thing, because that came out, I think it was a year earlier, in 1982. Yeah, so
the
some
twin
influence.
sons. This is
It's Star Wars,
alien
Twin
world.
Sons. Yeah. So, by the way, speaking of Star Wars and music and all that stuff, did the score in this seem recognizable at all, Jason?
It did, but I know there's a lot.
Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is a really great movie. It's the same score. It's the same composer. He did the same score about a year earlier. It's the same exact thing. He reused a lot of his score from James Horner. Reused a lot of the score from Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan and put it into this one.
I listened to something else recently that was another thing that Horner basically riffed his Wrath of Khan stuff on, and I can't think of what it.
Didn't you make note that a lot of this score was actually reused in The Rocketeer?
Yeah, The Rocketeer and Aliens got some of the score too.
Aliens, yeah. He reused a lot of repurposed old assets and just kind of like shifted them around.
If you look at the track listing, it is a 2-disc track. Like he
it's
apparently
huge.
just wrote like a giant suite and said like, "Oh, we only need that much. Well, let me keep the other chunk and just run with it." It's a smart idea for a composer because writing that kind of stuff is hard.
Mm-hmm. Then you can just sell it as property to another company and give it to another movie. Like this,
So
just catch a quick paycheck. It's
I
fine.
just had to look something up because even I remember being confused about this as a kid, and I just had to go look it up. I forgot. KRULL. I kept thinking KRULL, and I always thought this KRULL was the name of the monster, but KRULL's the name of the planet.
The planet.
It's kind of like, and I just looked that up now. I'm like, oh wait, again, I remember being confused as a child, where it's like KRULL, and there's like this cool name, and it's like the monster. I kept thinking was KRULL as a kid, and I just was like, oh wait, I'm like, no, it's just the Beast. Like,
yeah, they
It's
just call
the
him the
Beast.
Beast. There's not a lot to like remember there, especially for an amazing design like that. It's almost a disservice to call it Beast.
And like what? Like again, the word KRULL is cool, but it's like it'd be like, here's my movie, Earth. Like, think about it, that's just kind of weird. Like, what?
Well, that's why M. Night Shyamalan added after to the beginning of it, so that way it would differentiate it.
Yeah, I mean, so there's just, yeah.
It sounds like we're all ripping to get into the other half of this, but I just want to sum up the things that we're keeping are the like fantastical setting. The glaive must stay. We like our team. We just want more of them. We're hip to like the practical effects. Maybe there's a little bit of like shift in art design, but like we kind of dig the way that they crafted it.
Yeah. Give them a little bit more money so they can finish some of the special effects. The tail end of this movie, you can see the money just disappeared.
Let's just say one thing that they don't have in this film, and it just popped into my head. One thing I hated about that era, especially of cartoons, was the obligatory cute character. Snarf, Uni.
They kind of got him with the kid, but he's not really present very much.
Yeah, he's there as like kid helper, but he's not like chewing scenery being like Meh! And I knew that stuff was for me as a kid, and I hated it as a kid.
He kind of reminded me of a bit of was it Boxy from Battlestar Galactica? A little bit of that, just like this random kid just showing up on this military ship.
You got that more with Ergo though, with how like he would turn into a dog or the goose, like.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, he just appears. Why?
He's magic, man. Like,
okay,
he's the Gandalf of our group.
But he behaves more like Merry or Pippin, so
Whatever.
fine.
Well, let's transfer into the back half of the show. I'd love to hear what you guys are aching to change about this movie. Before we do that, I'd like to read through
Yes.
my notes every 15 minutes while drunk
Yes,
watching
I
this
am
movie last
so
night.
curious about Drunken Seth's notes.
I'm just gonna read it verbatim. I'm not gonna like explain
Okay.
each one. There's just a lot here.
Okay.
So the way I decided to phrase it was me 15 minutes into KRULL. Oh no, it's so bad it's good. Me 30 minutes into KRULL. Oh my god, KRULL is amazing. It's about deadly magic fidget spinners. Me 40 minutes into KRULL. I put a frozen pizza. You'll thank me later. Alexa, set a 15-minute timer. Okay, 15-minute timer. Thank you, darling. The pizza was fantastic, by the way.
I hope so.
Me 60 minutes into KRULL. Oh no, this movie is edited by a ghost with unfinished business. Me 75 minutes into KRULL. And it turns into a checklist at this point. And the checklist says, how do I convince Jesse to love this movie? How can I pitch a Muppet version of this movie? And is this what we get when we order Lord of the Rings from eBay? I can't check that one off, Seth. I don't know how to check that one. This note is just uninterrupted in not the same format as any of the others. It just says, oh my god, this spider rocks. Me 90 minutes into KRULL. We need to cover 1,000 leagues in a day. Only rocket horses could do that. We have no time. Thank God we found these rocket horses, and we're going to spend the next 10 minutes taming these horses while we have no time. God forbid we don't show the capture and training of miraculous rocket horses that only function to get us out of this corner we've written ourselves into. I think we're going up at this point. And then the last note just says, Rel, no, justice for Rel. And that was all of my notes for KRULL.
That was glorious.
Love that so much.
I had a great time, Jason. I want to be very clear.
Yeah.
This is like probably one of my favorite movies of the season. There's so much that I really just fucking dug about it. And then there would be chunks of editing. Like my only note for this whole episode is it's edited really, I don't want to say poorly, strangely.
Yes.
Is that the best word?
Yeah.
It's the editing choices are odd in how long they will sit on things, how little of dialogue they will show you, but like turn it into voiceover for long periods. Like the whole opening of the movie is a dialogue scene that they shot, but then they just cover it with a lot of horseback riding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like they're not poor editing choices. A lot of the movie is like well edited. They're like the action takes place in a way that you can follow. So I'm at a loss to describe what it is about the editing that I don't like. There's just a lot of it that I don't like, but the content I'm a huge fan of. Jason, what doesn't work for you here? What are we changing?
So to me, it's funny that we mentioned that people were saying this was a knockoff of Star Wars, because I don't really think it is, but it would have done a lot better if it would have
had it
been.
Because
like, okay, so the biggest part I would have done would have been to have some kind of like build up with that glaive where he has to like train to use it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he gets to use it along the way, kind of like Luke and Obi-Wan with the lightsaber. We kind of see it kind of leveling up through the first two films, condense it to one film. And then I think it would have been much cooler if the main villain wasn't necessarily like this gigantic, almost 80s video game head, but maybe more of a kind of like the bad guy from Legend, the Devil, like a bigger person that kind of cool ass weapon.
Or a Skeletor type of
and they could have used the glaive to win the fight versus the I'll hold my lady friend's hand and kind of pew pew with like love, because it was like, but that. And again, you could say, well, Jason, like, so now you want the love interest just to kind of be a damsel in distress. I think for what this film was, that probably would have worked better. like in this case, maybe more of a classic Disney with Sleeping Beauty, because it's such a
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, it's
Yeah.
playing with
yeah,
tropes. It's what
it's
it
such a
is.
basic
So-
story. So I mean, so I think a villain that might have been not just a head, but maybe more of an active bad guy, and then that glaive gets more play along the way. Like that's the big DNA that to me is missing. Which again, you'd say, well, that
I
you've
agree.
described Tron, you've described Star Wars, but it's like, yeah, because it works. Like you
Yeah.
like, and even what you said, Jesse, about he just goes and picks this thing up. It would have been cool if there would have been like some kind of interesting riddle or something to get it, or like a fight, or maybe the guy that he
So-
beats to get it trains him how to use it. I don't know.
I have a fix for
Yeah.
that actually. So at the beginning they show the wedding and she's like, "You have the fire, I give you my fire."
Mhm.
What it could have been is it could have been lava that the glaive was in, and he goes and he's about to be burned because it shows a little fire
Yeah,
there, and then you could have like a voiceover or something saying like, the fire I gave you with my true love is what's going to protect you. Like, because it
Mm.
shows, like, it tells in the beginning like these two are gonna have the greatest son in the universe and he's gonna like rule the universe or some shit. So like it could
Some
have
Dune shit in there
right.
just
So
for
it could
fun.
be
Yeah.
like
Highlander. Hey, at
her
the end you have the power, right?
right. And
Right.
Oh
it
yeah.
could have been like her being like, "This is my last gift to you before I was stolen. Like, I will protect you with this fire I gave you." And that could have been how he got the glaive. And no
Yeah.
one else
Yeah.
has that because she gave him. And that could have been your fire pew pew thing, as you
Sure.
said.
Yeah.
Like, and that would have been the fix to showing their connection, but also like you can't just pick the thing up, you know?
But
I love the idea earlier of the glaive being able to talk. Like
yes,
if the glaive itself is
sentient thing.
training him to use it,
maybe it's the
I
trainer.
like yeah, I love that it allows for like a cool voiceover role within your movie. Which is always great, but I think it also like we could get more exposition in naturally because the idea of the glaive is if it can speak, all it can do is tell you stuff, right? So
Mhm.
we can use that as an opportunity
Well,
to like explain our world
what if,
more.
right, when they find it, maybe it's not in a volcano, but maybe it's in some like tricked out crash spaceship, which it's right now it's
Ooh.
like, artificial intelligence, and like you said, Seth, all I need to do would be like flash, like, hello, I'm the glaive, right? Or it could have been anyone,
Yeah.
like, so you could have like Mel Blanc or somebody do it or whatever. Maybe that would have been too funny, but yeah, like then you have a little more sci-fi, like, ooh, it's this weapon from the wreckage, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then now it's a character. It doesn't require CGI or special. It just could glow when it's speaking. And like you said, it would
Yeah,
provide
yeah.
exposition, and it could train him how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And maybe there was
I love it.
And who knows? There could have been another spaceship crashed on the planet if they want to lean that, where the beast villain got something else. Maybe not another glaive. That might be generic,
Ooh.
but like, well, he's got one of these other two. Well, I don't know. I mean, you wanted
The
Yeah.
anti-clave, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
this is sci-fi. We can lean into that. I love giving him something to fucking do as well beyond like haunt the team on their way to find
Right.
him.
Yeah.
Giving
The
our
only
villain like a goal
Well,
is a
here's
really good
another question.
idea.
Why are the
Yeah.
villains like running around in their spaceship? They seemingly are militaristically kicking everyone's ass. So like, if I'm the top dog military, why am I running away from you guys? It's like, I'm here. Like I could,
Right.
Oh yeah.
right? Like why am I like, well, I got to run every 20 minutes from what, 5 people?
Right.
Right.
Like even that,
Or
like,
here's
you have a whole army. Like what am I come here and die? Like that's right.
Right.
here's another idea. The fact that the actual Black Fortress is a spaceship apparently. So you got what you came for, right? Leave.
Yeah, just go.
Just leave. That's why I'm saying maybe pulling the sci-fi stuff out of the movie would be better, because if it's literally a spaceship, once they've got the princess, they could just like leave.
Yeah.
maybe
They don't
maybe,
need to.
maybe we make it so that like the glaive and the anti-glaive are like needed together to like get the ship running again.
We turned
Like,
it
these
into
are-
Pikmin. We need to fix the ship in order to get off
Kinda.
the planet.
That was an original.
Here's a weird way to. This is going to be really complicated, so let me explain. So, what if I keep wanting to call him KRULL. He's not KRULL. He's the Beast. God damn it. God damn it. Just call him KRULL. Just call him
Okay, that's
KRULL.
gonna be our biggest fix.
Biggest fix. He's called KRULL. God damn it. All right, so KRULL needs the actual glaive. Let's say he needs that. But he can't get to it because there's some thing that keeps him out of the ship or fortress, temple, whatever it is that's protecting the glaive. So by taking the princess, he knows the prince is going to need to go get the glaive to fight him. So he's basically just using him to get it and then bring the prince to him so he can kill him off and take the glaive himself.
I like that.
Okay.
You know, it kind of falls into the trope of that was my plan all along, but it's better than
nothing.
No, this is the kind of like genre where that works, right? Like that is a good use of that trope, I think, in this setting. I think doing that in a way that like allows our villain to have a little agency is a great way to like this villain could be a Darth Vader competitor, right? Like not to ape on the Star Wars clone thing, but I
kind of looks it though too, honestly.
Yeah, I think this is a great villain design. I don't want to lose that, and giving him more agency, more interaction into the story, and even like reason to do things. I'm digging all of that. That's
the only main villain that's allowed to get away with being non-corporeal is Sauron. That's it. Because they tried to make him corporeal in a deleted scene for Return of the King, and it's not so good. No, it did not work. They cut it out. So.
That is knowing your craft to know when to cut out stuff like that.
Yes. So.
Well, Hope, on your watch, what was your first? Let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
Is there enough good in this movie that you feel like this is a good sci-fi recommend, or was there a point in the movie where you were like, oh, there's a reason this is on Film Rescue, this is probably not the thing worth seeking out? Where do you feel like you land?
I feel like, again, I liked enough individual pieces of it. Again, it was just connecting it all together. I feel like it's a good representation of like the fantasy 80s. I wouldn't say it's sci-fi though. That's the thing. It's more fantasy. And I think that's I think what all of us are coming to a consensus on is the fact that it needs to be more fantasy and not sci-fi. And I think that's the biggest misconception. And I think that's where the Film Rescue comes in, is we need to make it realize what it is, because it kind of like veers off so many different directions, and it's like, no, okay, just it's like when you bowl, you want to give him bumpers so he doesn't go in the gutter. Like that's what we need to do. Just let me show you these bumpers so you know where to go, and well,
because like, are the Slayers shooting lasers?
Yeah,
that was my understanding. I like the idea of mixing
or
that kind of sci-fi fantasy into fantasy.
It like shot once, and then they would be like, and they had that slow, deliberate pace where they were like, so like, again, they were cool design, creepy when they died, and then the way they walked, and then that like ray gun, it was like it was like a magic missile,
right? And then that's where I was confused.
Yeah. Speaking of which, you just triggered something I've remembered. So you said magic missile. This was originally supposed to tie into Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh,
so I think
there it is.
I think if you're going to lean into science fiction and make this kind of a Masters of the Universe type space, I think you got to lean into it so people like us aren't like, is it magic? Like it's like there's a wrecked spaceship. There's like, or heavy metal with Tarna, where there's like pipes and tubes and machinery, right? Where it's like, okay, this is magic and technology. You've really got to like make it so there's no doubt. But this thing is like, did you not do it because you're cheap, or like you just didn't well? Like it needs to be clear. Like this is like a magical universe, or it's heavy metal Tarna, Masters of the Universe, where it's like ancient technology with wizards. And I think you've really, and maybe the bad guys would be technology or the good guys, whatever. But it's
Sure.
not clear because it's like, was that magic or
Mhm.
was it a laser? Probably nobody knows. Like even if you ask the
Right.
players, they'd be
Yeah.
like, it's a beam.
There's some slight crossover between this and the previous episode you were on, Highlander 2, The Quickening.
Yeah.
There's some slight crossover. It's like, pick one or the other. Is it magic or is it science fiction? You got to pick one. You can't have both. This film feels very reactionary to what was happening at the time. Like, Star Wars is popular. Blade Runner came out a year before. Dune is in development, coming out the
Tron, yeah.
following year. Like, there's so much stuff. And then you have things like Legends, and you have Conan the Barbarian, Dark Crystal, and there's so much stuff happening. Like, this feels like another one that's following suit,
Ice Pirate.
and it's trying to be like, yeah, it's like let's take a little bit of this one and a little bit of this one and a little bit of this one. It's like, well, none of that mixes well with that, so it's oil and water.
Look how many
So it's
VH,
ambitious. It's ambitious, but it's also kind of a mess.
like how many like barbarian films came out after Conan the Barbarian with like the Boris?
Oh God, so many.
There's so many
Yeah.
where it's like I think a lot of
Look at Mad Max. How many Mad Max knockoffs came out after Mad Max or 2, The Road
Yeah,
Warrior came
like-
out?
yeah.
How many knockoffs?
here's a question: who had more knockoffs, the Mad Max family tree or the Conan the Barbarian family tree? That's a good question. Those two
We'll
films.
be here for
I
a
wouldn't.
hot
I wouldn't
minute.
put money on that. There's too many to
Yeah,
count.
I mean,
There is literally a whole book dedicated to all the knockoffs, and it goes through all of them one by one. I'm gonna try to find that on Amazon right now. It's on my wish list. Let me try to find it.
no, and I think
I'm gonna try to find
I think you bring up a really good point. And again, I was living through this era as a little kid, and like it. I mean, literally, a lot of this is about me. I mean, not necessarily me, the individual, but me as
You
kind
were
of
in the
a
movie.
demographic of
Mm.
like I
Right.
was the nickel they were chasing around of that like teenage, preteen of like, what do these little kids want? You know what I mean? I wanted two things: to go to the toy store and the movie theater. Like I was that
Right.
like I was the demographic that they were pitching toys, cartoons, and movies to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think still to this day they're still chasing my demographic for the same stuff. I had a really weird
Yeah.
observation. One of my really good friends purchased the Unicron action figure from HasLab. Huge things, like $1,500.
Whoa.
I'm like,
yeah.
you know
Ooh.
what? My kids have no interest in toys now. When I was their age, I was killing for action figures. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I think we're still chasing my demographic, whatever that is, like 40 to 60 or whatever, of people to still want this stuff because
Not even that. I whenever I go to the Lego store, I see more people my age than I
Yeah.
see little kids.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's the same principle. Like when you go to like comic shops and you see the action figures, you don't see little kids going to the
Yeah.
action figures. You see like my
No.
age or older going to be like, let me get this collectible I couldn't get 20 years ago to my collection
Right.
now.
I don't even know what kids like
Fortnite?
anymore. I honestly don't. Like, I know it makes it sound like I'm old, but
Minecraft.
it's like yeah, it's like I feel like a lot of parents give their kids like an iPad. They're just kind of like, here, go have fun.
So
I know that sounds shitty, but it's
they love
you know.
Fortnite, and the other thing
Fortnite.
is like,
Ah,
yeah,
no.
it's a pop culture blender, and that we could do a whole show on just my kids because just having kids and kind of watching pop culture through the lens of being their parent, it's
Yeah.
very hard to
Oh,
relate to. But yeah, a lot of the stuff was incredibly reactionary, and I think KRULL is definitely, that's why it's always been second tier because it was just kind of a Me Too,
Yeah.
still a cool Me Too, and I think it has that cachet
Yeah.
because and there was like a KRULL pinball game. I think there was some KRULL
Yeah,
arcade
that's
games.
cool.
It had
That's cool.
cachet for all
I
the
see
things we're
that.
talking about.
Yeah. And when
It's
we say
funny-
Me Too, we're just saying like as in yes, I'm also
Yeah,
here, not
as
the Me
well.
Too movement from a few
Right.
seconds. Just to clarify that.
Yes,
Let's
it
just
was
clarify.
a Me Too product of trying to duplicate bigger and better things to get an extra nickel for sure.
Yeah. So
It's
sometimes that works. Like A Legend of Zelda was the Me Too to the film Legend because it's like it's just Zelda. Now Zelda is the more popular as compared
So
to
here's a
Legends.
question,
right.
and again, just thinking about KRULL because of this podcast. Are we gonna like knock on wood in 3 months? It'll be like Netflix. We're redoing KRULL, and you'll be like,
Oh god.
Whoa.
Honestly, this is one that
That-
I would not be mad at a reapproach on the material. Like
yeah, I could see this one getting a bit of a remake or a
Just
redo.
tighten it
I
up,
could see that.
a
I
mini series,
yeah.
like 6
Mini
episodes
series
of
would do it
you know
better.
something like that for the fans to like because this is a very fertile world. Like just
Yeah.
as someone that looks at world building and like what that can turn into, this world is very functional. Like mixing dark fantasy and sci-fi.
Mhm.
If you're just doing it straight, I think we're kind of pitching moving more into the fantasy sorcery realm with
Yeah.
our pitch for the episode. But like even if you're to do it straight, that is a really good pitch idea for a series just to keep it going. Not even like this is such a big world. You could do the opposite side of KRULL, like the other side of the globe,
Yeah.
and find out what the fuck's going on down there.
If
You know what I
budget
mean?
was no object, I would want to see like a live, and I keep mentioning Tarna because like those rotoscoped 80s things from every the movie where
Yeah.
it's like it's this
Mhm.
sort of cyberpunk technology magic like buildings built on top of a giant skeleton, like, and they were able to do it because it was a cartoon with rotoscoping, so they were able to kind of cheat and do things that were a little more fantastic than things that were more
Right.
grounded by limitations of budget and construction. So if I had my way, I think this would be cool to lean into that science fantasy if we had the assuming we had the budget to do it correctly and it would look kind of cool and weird.
Yeah.
So I would be for it if we had the
Yeah.
budget. I think this film just it was like, hey, we've got a couple set pieces and stuff, and we'll say it's technology, but it's just like here's a castle, and like the night. You know what I remember too? Like the soldiers in the Good Kingdom, they kind of had these like kind of like almost motorcycle helmets.
Kind of.
They were
Mm.
like the
Oh
they were like the
yeah.
counterparts of like the Slayers, and it was kind of like they were a little bit not they didn't look like a medieval soldier from like a museum. It was kind of like, oh, it's kind of like plastic. So I mean, like there was that. But
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
didn't lean right. I mean, it was kind of like a
Yeah.
little futury, but like just enough that you're like, what is that? Because that's the like I don't know.
Yeah, no, I something I'd love to highlight off of your point is I love highlighting the different aspects of filmmaking that don't get their time in the limelight. Crawl is one of those series where we could really talk about set designers
Yeah.
and a set designer building out this world through like visual storytelling, through like the way they would construct like a city on Crawl. That's something we haven't seen. How they would construct, like different kingdoms and castles and things like that in this area. A set designer and that job could take the sci-fi film that we watched and turn that into a miniseries or a movie and just absolutely crush that. I see you just dropped a costuming link
Yeah,
in the Zen. That's another one too. Your costuming could really really world build you in like a serious direction. I think this is the kind of shit Zack Snyder wishes he was doing. I think he genuinely
With Rebel Moon. Yeah.
like no
Yeah.
shade. I genuinely think if he had a better understanding of like world building in that way, this is the kind of stuff he would want to be doing.
Right.
And it's a cool idea. Like it's something I'm behind. A set designer, a costumer, would absolutely make or break this project 100%. I watched the new Willow series on Disney Plus, and it's kind of obvious that it's on sets. It's kind of obvious that it's like not been constructed out in the woods like they did for Lucas and a lot of the shooting that they did there. And so it it not that it's a failure of set design, but it's very obvious that it's small. And this movie
Yeah.
big, right? They shoot a lot out in actual
Mhm.
locations. I want to highlight the set designers. They do not get their due limelight, and this is, I think, a great hypothetical opportunity to like bring in an Oscar award winning set designer to run something like that. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, he just posted in the
Yeah.
chat, Shepperton Studios. This was filmed on the 007 stages.
and just
That's why it looks
just
huge.
glancing
Yeah.
through that link I just sent real quick while you were talking, like it's like science fiction, and I'm like, okay, you guys really like it's so strange. Like it really is
Yeah.
like where it's like you're in these like landscapes that all seem like they're out of a Excalibur movie, but it's like the
Yeah.
soldiers are kind of high tech, and you're like, what? It would be like putting a motorcycle.
They're aliens, I guess.
Are they? I mean, again, back to Highlander,
I
where
don't
it's
know.
like, is Highlander an alien? I just thought he was like some guy that had a magic power from a country.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, yeah,
Those
it's
owl assassins from Highlander would be very fitting in KRULL. Like, I wouldn't
Oh
even
my
question
God.
them showing up in this movie. I really wouldn't.
Oh, the flying
Well,
guys.
and you know what? You
Yeah,
got the
yeah.
Slayers. Like, what if the bad guys had more of a tier like Skeletor, where he's kind of got these like grunts that don't talk but are just creepy, but maybe like 2 or 3 bad guys that could have been like the
Yeah.
flavor out. So if the beast is
Give Liam Neeson somebody to
Well,
fight.
right, if
Hell
the
yeah.
beast is-
Yeah, there you go.
Because think about Tron, right? The MCP was like the spinning head, but he still had
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Sark kind of chewing scenery and being kind of like nasty. So you could have had
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
beast is like, okay, he's like the MCP head, and then he could have had some creepy like the Owl Assassins from or something where they're with the
Love it.
they're with the Slayers. It's
Yeah.
kind of these guys or girls with like costumes and flavor, and like they're the and then he gets to use the glaive on them, like haha, right?
Mhm.
Like a beast man or a trap jaw or an
Yeah.
Evelyn, type trope where like they're there.
Yeah. Remember in Return to Oz, the monkeys that were on the little roller skates? They kind of like they
Yeah.
had the wheels on their hands. Kind of like that. It's like it's weird and creepy. It's just
It'd be very fitting in this like 80s setting for sure. Like that's
Yeah.
I was
an
gonna say, maybe
incredible
not that,
visual
because
for
that
this
was
set
super
design.
creepy.
there's a
Listen,
lot in Return to Oz that's super creepy.
Yeah.
That movie's like a fucking nightmare.
I'm
Jesus
honestly
Christ.
shocked that KRULL's not rated R for that wizard's head collapsing in on itself, dude. Like some of that shit is harrowing.
Well, this is before Temple of Doom.
Yeah, Temple
Yeah.
of Doom
Before
84.
Temple of Doom, like
Wild.
Indiana Jones came out when did Raiders of the Lost Ark come
81.
out?
And Temple of Doom was 84.
Yeah, so this
and
is
Crusade
so
was 84.
prior to this. You got the head explosion, the head shrinking, and the end of the film. It's like yeah, you could get away with this back
Yeah.
then, dude.
It wasn't the same rating system, so
Yeah, or but look at the Zucker Brothers movie Airplane. There's you get to see full frontal female nudity in that for like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a PG movie.
Oh, that movie Leo won his Oscar for, The Revenant. The movie it was originally based on. I think it's a
It was based on an original movie, was it?
yeah. There's a previous. I think it's based on a book actually, but there was a movie. I think it's A Man Called Horse, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't remember the title offhand. Anyways, that was another one of those like 70s pre PG-13 where there's just like straight up full female nudity in it and goes out as a PG cowboy film, and it's like yikes.
It's based on a book from 2002 called The Revenant, which is based in part on a true story, partially on a true story.
very
Oh.
loosely.
I don't see a previous iteration of that story or film though. Maybe I don't know.
The movie was A Man Called Horse. It's a Richard Harris movie actually.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know why I thought this was the precursor to The Revenant or like.
I don't know. I didn't care for The Revenant very much. So
How did we get to the
I like
Revenant,
it all right.
guys? Let's go back to
How did I do that? You're right. You're exactly right, Hope. How did I
What?
do that?
I don't know. I
Let's,
want to
let's-
correct one thing. I did say that this was supposed to be part of D&D. Apparently, it was supposed to, but they didn't actually get the rights to it. Gary Gygax says, to the best of my knowledge and belief, the producers of KRULL never approached TSR for a license to enable their film use in the D&D IP. So I want to just correct myself. I misread that.
Okay.
Well, it
There was
feels,
rumors it was supposed to tie in, but it didn't happen.
It feels in that area. Like I
It
can.
It feels
I-
like it fits
if
enough
we-
that it feels like it fits.
Yeah, if we for this episode decided to like say, hey, this is D&D related. There's space stuff in D&D now. Like it's
Yeah.
Yeah, D&D's
Uh,
grown vastly since.
Hey, if we got to
Wait.
do the tie-in, if we're making like a modern version of this, and we want to get Chris Pine involved to play Olin, all I'm saying,
Yes.
break.
get a Jarnathan character in our version. Yeah, that'd be fun. So to sum up our pitch, we're essentially saying there's some trimming that needs to be happen overall to the movie. We're gonna, like Hope said, add some connective tissue and make the glaive sentient, teaching Colwyn how to use it across the film. We've given our villain, which we've called KRULL, a little more agency in the story, as he needs the glaive to exit this godforsaken planet that he hates so much, and he decided to kidnap the princess to launch Colwyn into the journey, as Fresco mentioned. That
Should
takes
he
us
still
to
be? Should he still start out as the prince? Because if you really think about it, Colwyn doesn't have an arc.
if
I mean, I hate to use the hero's journey thing, as it's been done to fucking death at this point, and I'm quite
Look,
frankly
there's
sick of
enough
it.
changes going on. We can leave it at that.
Okay.
Here's my counter. I am willing to give Colwyn as much character development as Aragorn got in Lord of the Rings, which is like this much. You know what I mean? It's like,
All right, that's fair.
it's like he didn't need to change much. It's a good or it's like a good archetype for a character. He could not.
He's set to be the king, but doesn't want to be the king, but has to take up the role of being the king in order to save the kingdom.
That's a good leader, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know good
Yeah.
leaders don't want to be leaders. So, like, I find that compelling enough. I think, and then the finale, Jason has changed to give our villain a little MCP riff, as well as giving us some extra muscle
Yes.
for our guys to
Flavor.
fight, because we're also not killing Rel until the end. That's my submission: is he doesn't get crushed. He gets to be in the final fight. Maybe he gets killed by KRULL. I can sacrifice the character. I just need the death to be meaningful.
Or maybe like some of the villain, like my, so we've got Rel, we've got the little kid and the seer, we've got the wizard that turns into animals, and right, and we've got our protagonist. I want the villains to have that too. So there's like like you said, the owl guys from Highlander too, like right, or just something where we have. And it could have been like great character actors from that time just chewing scenery.
Oh yeah,
they work for KRULL.
Right.
Your
maybe
line assassins, like, who just come in for a good line and leave. Like, yeah.
Right.
I mean,
I love that term, line assassin.
and again, maybe some of these obstacles along the way could have been, like the spider lady uses the spider to kill one of the scenery chewers or whatever, like, and Rel maybe sacrifices himself, like dragging one of these guys away or whatever. I just think it would have given more flavor, because I think, I mean, look, and this is obvious, but great villains are the flavor in all these stories. It's never the hero.
Oh yeah.
Right.
They're the scenery chewers. They're the cool costumes. We hate them, but they're the reason that
we love to hate them.
We love to hate them, and like it's like the Beast just is. If you're gonna have like the villain hierarchy, like, and you're gonna have this like we've got our stormtroopers and we've got our MCP, but we don't have our Sark. And just to me, like that banner between Sark and MCP and Tron, I love that as a kid. I still love it. And or Time Bandits, where you have the ultimate.
Yeah, I just rewatched that recently.
And he's got kind of like slave drone dudes that are like wrapped in plastic, and he keeps killing. Like, they're like, I have a question. He keeps killing them. Like, you're just kind of like, it's just, we need that level of like scenery chewing, and like the Beast is just, he's just like, I'm this, he's the MCP.
Yeah. Time Bandits is a great one to bring up, because I love it, smack dab in the middle of that movie. They have that sequence with the ogre with the bad back and his wife. Just doesn't do anything to move the story along. It is just a fun fantasy sequence for your characters to do. I love that shit. That is exactly what I want in the middle of this movie.
I just had a thought.
Yeah.
This is just the thing I want to just put in. The woman in the web, can we actually have the spider have like the actual spider body is normal, but the top is a woman?
Are you trying to retrofit?
Don't you dare fucking say Rebel Moon. No, it's not Rebel Moon, god damn it. It's Dark Souls. K-Log, the spider woman.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll take a Dark Souls influence.
Yeah, let's go to the good one, god damn it. Okay? Can we do that, please? Because it's just like a woman sitting in a giant web, and it's like, it didn't, like, I thought, oh, woman of the web. I was like, oh, is it like a spider that's like a half woman, half spider thing? Like,
I like
no, it's just a big spider that's walking around.
Well,
it's like,
again,
can you like combine the two?
Again, unless you had Ray Harryhausen, could this crew of people pulled off that?
They were limited to their abilities,
right?
Just like
later it was
the
just
fire mares, like it's the same. situation.
Yeah, I mean the spider in stop motion, I get that because it has no face or anything, so right. But if you put a person on it, now we're expecting again. Think Clash of the Titans, which came out around this time, 1981, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
Medusa was probably the top tier creature, human stop motion. Like that was like peak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
had the man Ray Harryhausen do that. So I mean, to me, unless you've got him, I get why
Yeah.
they
You're
did.
kind of
Just
screwed.
again, like
Yeah.
we're limited. We can't.
You can only do so much.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, they effectively covered that lack of talent because I never really thought about merging the two. I kind of thought it was kind of Brothers Grimm, where it's like I'm in here and here's the spider. You know what I mean? Like it. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. I didn't look at it as like why didn't they do that? Because it was kind of neat and creepy. Like here's the spider.
Yeah.
Here's the
Mhm.
person, and she's kind of living in there. So
It's like an acting scene chewing scene too for both of those
Yeah.
actors. Like it's the dramatic center of the film, and that mirror bit was really cool with the young woman old
That
woman
was
effect,
cool.
like
I liked
capturing
that a
that
lot.
practically in camera. That was fucking dope. There's a lot of really cool filmmaking on display here. I'm like the filmmaking itself is so
That's
exciting.
what I'm saying. There's so many there's like 7 or 8 good short films in this film.
well, even the guy that
Yeah.
transforms into like a duck or a dog, like where they kind of like even that is like it seems very
Yeah.
creepy
Yeah.
and kind of like body horrorish, but not in like a scary kind of way. So I think they really did a very good job of working around with the constraints they had at that time.
It's almost like you can tell they needed a strong story pass, and that would have really guided the ship, I think, across the production. That it's just you're not seeing the
Well,
connection scene to scene,
think
unfortunately.
about this. If you look at Highlander, and I praised Highlander in our Highlander 2 thing, that just worked. And then you see how bad the second one is. And then I'm almost wondering how lucky was it they got the first one even as right as they did. And maybe
Right,
a lot of the
right.
stuff was like, guys, write the script in 6 weeks. Do it. And they're just like, oh, okay, here, we're working, tight. And they're just like, here you go. And it's like, great, we've got to get it out because we've got a pinball and a video game to make. And we've got deadlines. And this is a for-profit thing. And they're just slamming it together. Just get it done. And like,
Yeah.
we're talking about stuff. And again, this isn't Lord of the Rings where you had a book that was written by this expert
Right.
level writer over his
Master,
whole life,
yeah.
and you can kind of distill. This is like probably just slam it out, get it out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is for the movies. We're here to make money. It's going to be kids like Jason. He's 9, right? Get the spider, get the dudes
Love it.
blown up, like get the
Drain his future savings.
yeah, right. We don't care. So I think maybe some of this stuff is just kind of like get it done, go, and like we're really getting deep into it. Did these people have the time to do that when they wrote it? My guess is probably not.
Right.
Well, I'm looking at it right now. Apparently, this was in development since 1980.
Whoa.
And what had happened was the general plot never really changed, but all the stuff surrounding the plot changed.
Okay.
Like there was like multiple versions of the script. It was re-edited, rewrote, and it was very dialogue heavy at one point, lacking special effects. And it just seems like by the end, it's like, okay, we have to just go into production.
Take it.
We need something. So it's kind of like what you're saying. Like they probably had a first script and just said, yeah, rewrite it to make it more action heavy.
Well,
that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
It's probably just like, just get it out there and get it done. We gotta start shooting. We lose the actors in 6 weeks.
Well, think about this too. Like even look at this panel. There's 4 people that have film knowledge and opinions. And like even though we kind of all are on the same page, if we said Hope, write the script, and then she puts it out with her point of view, and then they're like, Hope's fired, Jesse, you do it. And then you're like, okay, blah, and maybe you're a little bit funnier and more carefree. And then Jesse, you're fired, Jason. And I'm like, let's make it more violent and more. And I think that's why a lot of these films, Justice League, end up making no sense because there's a million writers, and you're like, is this like Young Batman or is this Dark Knight? Like what? Like and there's no tone. Where is it jokey? Is it serious? Like something was important to me, but not to you. And like Seth's gonna write it after I do, and he strips out all the stuff that I thought was really cool because he doesn't think it's cool. And so what you described, I was thinking no deadline. You're describing the other hellscape of like, here's another person and change it, and it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
15
Right.
different people that have.
That's why it feels like there's a bunch of really good scenes, but there's just no tissue between any of
Yeah,
them.
and that actually
That's why
kind
it
of
feels like
tracks to what
that.
we're
Yeah.
talking about. Where, geez, there's some really
Mhm.
good stuff, but it kind of seems disjointed and like maybe ideas that if we
Yeah.
would have had the original draft, we'd say, hey, this makes a lot more sense.
Right.
I wonder if
And
that draft exists somewhere.
Or
that
maybe
it,
Yeah.
maybe they did it more like we were saying, and someone said, too much like Star Wars, bro. Different.
Mm.
Change
Need
it.
to
Yeah.
even it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Superman just shows back up. I don't know why, but he just does.
Yeah, you can definitely a lot of things can happen on a production that are unexpected that can have these kind of results, and we are really lucky to be sitting here in 2024 with the ability to know what a production looks like beginning to end and put people on it that can carry that football the whole way across. And movies
Yeah.
haven't always been made like that. A lot of it used to be a bill passing along where it's like, oh, this writer wrote, and now that's being sent to a producer, and the producer's going to put other people on it. Jason's not in the least wrong in talking about how that writing stuff gets passed down, and the note is genuinely the note could have been, we need to add a rock climbing sequence because rock climbing sales are up right now, and we could stand to benefit from this donor on our production. and
Right.
and then
Yeah.
suddenly we're taking the actors out to rock climb, and now it's like, well, you took them out to rock climb, you need to put a whole rock climbing sequence, you got to build that sequence out, and that there's no way to know what that looks like on the day when you're shooting it. Only the editors and directors find out later. So
Yeah.
to anyone working on the film, they might have been like, this is amazing, look at these effects, look at these props, like we're making something awesome, the cameras are good, all the shots are great, and they don't know the mess that is going to come out on the other end when it
Yeah.
gets into the edit.
It's like how we're complaining now that films are made by algorithms and AI. It's like complaining like, well, this is popular right now in pop culture, so let's got to put that into there. It's like,
Yeah.
well, this character is really successful. Let's put that in there. Like it doesn't feel like it comes from a genuine point of inspiration. It's like we said, this film is very reactionary. It's regurgitating things we've already seen, but
Right.
tweaking it a little bit. Just be like, oh, it's its own thing. We promise. It's not really. You know.
Like imagine was it Clive Barker, the writer, the horror writer?
Yes.
Clive
Yeah.
Barker's Krull. Like one
Oh God.
story mind
That is my wet
carrying
dream.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know
Do
what
the
I mean?
Cenobites show up as the main villains now?
Fucking why not? I'm going for hard R. You know what I mean? Like
Sure, why not?
Let's do a Nightbreed mixed with Hellraiser mixed with.
like if you're doing dark fantasy, let's do some dark sci-fi. That sounds like it marries really well. But like that's just an example of how a product like this could have a more cohesive feeling to it. Is not this, kind of pre-Marvel production, Henry Ford line to make movies and
Sure.
just pass it down to the next job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love our pitch. Not a lot to have to tease out in here, if I'm being honest. I knew
Yeah.
when I was finishing the movie, I was like, oh, a lot of this is going to stay, isn't it? A lot of this is here
Yeah.
to stay. We just need
tweak
to
it.
tweak it. I love it.
Kick it in one direction or the other. So that's really what it needed.
And if you're looking for some direction in life, I could direct you to our merch store, which is in our link tree in the
Very
bio
slick.
Love it.
below. Jason, thank you so much for jumping on this episode with us. You brought us a banger. I had a great fucking time with it. This is getting added into my old sci-fi movie rewatch list because I had such a good time. I can see the old classic in here, and I appreciate you bringing it to
Yeah.
us.
Seth, if I could bring you some of the joy that I had seeing some of these films when I was a youngster, then that's what I mean. To me, these films are just a lot of fun, flaws and all. And most of these films from the '80s I have on physical media because I just like them so much. And again, they're not perfect, and I loved them as a kid. I still love them now, and I can turn my critical brain on or off and just watch them and just have fun or have a great talk like this. But if it introduced you to it and you had some fun, that's great. That's what being a fan's all about.
Exactly. No, you the new KRULL fan out of me. Jesse, Hope, thank you both for jumping on this one.
Absolutely.
Running through this adventure with us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It was a good way to spend our Easter. Yeah.
And I also I'm always a fan of bringing Jason on. He's always a blast, so it's always good to
Oh,
have an episode with him.
Well,
absolutely. Yeah, we got a killer movie, killer
and,
pitch.
and thanks for having me on. I'll plug my endless project. It seems I'm in year 2 of working on my next comic book, Lords of the Cosmos 5. Pre-launches on Kickstarter. You can find the link at Lenox Artist on Instagram and Twitter. I have it tagged up on the top of both my profiles. So hopefully it's good. Still working on it. It's just been a lot of work, and it's fun to actually be doing this on a
Wow.
Sunday instead of working on that, because it just seems like that's turning into a second job at this point to make it just right. So
Right.
Hey,
Mm.
you need to make it perfection.
perfection.
I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see it. It sounds cool. Lord of the Cosmos. We will have a link for that in the description below, wherever you're watching or listening as well. I think that's going to do it for this episode of Film Rescue. I have been your Pitchmaster General. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Good night.